For this video, I'm going to show you a few different ways that you can make some really fun backgrounds using chalk. The supplies that you'll need are some chalk. I have some pastel chalks here, but if you just have sidewalk chalk, that's okay too. And I have some cotton balls. I have scissors. If you want to, you could use a butter knife. I just use my scissors because it's pretty sharp on the edge, but you might want to get out a not very sharp knife, or even a spoon will work. And some paper. I have a few different colors here. If you just have white, that's okay too. This is a really fun project to do with black paper if you have some. And we're going to be looking at some pictures from the book We're Going on a Bear Hunt. So if you own this book, you could get that out too. In the book We're Going on a Bear Hunt, this is an adventure story, which the family in this book is going on an adventure. They're going on a scavenger hunt looking for a bear. I don't think they really expect to find one, but they're having a really good time and they're going all different places to look for a bear. So this book, the illustrator, the person who drew and designed the pictures for the story, the illustrator chose to do a drawing using pencil, and possibly they even got the pencils wet so it smudged a little bit, or they smudged it with their fingers. So they do pencil drawings for one page, and then the next page they used watercolor paints. So I'm going to show you how you can create a background for a story that you might want to create, and maybe you can design your own characters. So I'll give you some different background ideas. The first background idea that I want to give you is actually a background that I've been thinking about a lot lately, being that it's January, and that is Aurora Borealis. Those are the northern lights. So this would be a good setting, a good background for you if your story is in the Arctic, or maybe in the Netherlands or Sweden, or somewhere up north in Canada perhaps, where you'd be able to see these bright, colorful lights shining in the sky. So I have a piece of scratch paper here that's already been drawn on, but I don't want to use it for other things, so I'm going to use it to cut up. I'm also going to be using a black piece of paper. You don't have to use a black piece of paper. You could use blue paper. You could even use white if it's all that you have. But it looks really fun on black, so that's what I'm going to be using. What I'm going to do with my scrap paper is I have to first decide which direction I want my paper to go. Do I want it to be landscape mode or portrait mode? Okay, so a portrait would be if I was drawing a person, people are standing tall, so I'd want my paper to be tall. If I'm doing a landscape, like if I'm doing a scene outside, something long across, then I'm going to turn my paper landscape. So I think for my picture, I think I want to do landscape. So I'm also going to have this piece of paper be landscape as well, because I'm going to use the width of the paper. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use my scissors, big scissor snips. My thumb is up in the air for a happy scissors. So my thumb goes up to the ceiling, and I'm going to open my scissors wide for big alligator chomps. I'm going to put my paper all the way inside my scissors, and I'm just going to cut a big wavy line. I don't want to make it too tight of a wave. I want it to be nice and big and loose. So I'm going to use those big alligator chomps and make a wiggly line here going across my paper. So there I have one, and I'm going to start with this. I'll move some of my things out of the way. And for this part, I'm going to be using chalk. So I'm going to pick some colors that I think look really nice. And I'm just going to set this up near the top of my paper. Now, mine doesn't have to go straight across because I'm not attaching this to my paper. So I think I'm going to have it start off like an angle like this. Now I'm going to take another scrap piece of paper, or I happen to have some cardboard here, and I'm going to be taking my chalk. I'm going to use some bright colors, but I'm not just going to color on my picture. I can if I don't feel comfortable with the next step. and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But this is a new way to use chalk. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm actually going to be scratching on my chalk. So if you have a larger piece of chalk than I do, that might work better. In fact, I think I'll start with this bigger red one so it's easier to see. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to scratch my chalk until some of the dust comes off. Just getting some of the dust off, okay? I don't need a big pile of dust, just a little bit works. And don't worry, if you enjoy doing this, you'll get to do more. So don't worry that you're missing out. Now there's a couple different ways that you can use this. You can do it with your finger, you can use a paintbrush, or you can even use a cotton ball. Cotton ball is my favorite, but I'm going to show you how to do it with just your finger first. So I'm going to get my finger with some chalk on it. I'm going to hold my scrap paper that I just cut, and I'm just going to start on the paper that I cut, and I'm going to push the chalk away. I'm always pushing away, lifting up, starting here. I never want to start on the black paper. I'm always going to start on the scratch paper. And I'm going to push it away. And I'm going to keep doing this until I get all the way across. I don't have to do the whole thing red. When I run out of dust, I might choose a different color. I don't have to do it all the same color, but if you want to do all the same color, that's okay. I might go and grab a cotton ball to finish mine up because I don't want to have to keep washing my hands each time I use a different color. So now that I went all the way across on my curve, and I was very careful that I didn't move that paper while I was working, now I'm going to pull the paper away so you can see what happens. So now you can see I have this line here going across, and I have this gentle color coming above that line. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to lay my paper in a new place this time. I think I'll lay it right over here. And I'm going to do this again, layering right over the top, making sure that I don't move my scrap piece of paper, and I'm going to add in some new colors. The cotton ball is working really nice to make sure that my colors are nice and gentle. I don't want to have lines. I want it to kind of fade together like a gentle sky. Now my paper just slipped, but that's okay. So if your paper slips and it moves, you can just reposition and put it in a new spot, and that's okay. Okay, I'm just going to line mine up to kind of continue there, and that's okay that it's in a new place. Just try to be more careful and not let this slip. Another thing that I can do as I'm working, if I want to, you don't have to do this, but if you want to, if you're lining yours up and you're like, I kind of want a different curve, you have a couple of choices. You could flip your paper over and use the other side to get some different curves here, or you could simply cut your paper again and make some new curves. So that's what I'm going to do here. Plus then I have this cool kind of looking snake thing that's very colorful and fun. So I'm going to keep moving with mine. I don't have to go all the way to the bottom of the page, but I think I want to do at least one more row. You do what you think is best. You're the artist. Now, when you get closer to the bottom, about halfway to your paper, you have a couple of choices you can make. You can stop and leave it right here. This kind of makes it look like the ground is in dark shadow because it's nighttime, but the sky is all lit up with those beautiful northern lights. Or you can take this a step further if you want. Here's a way that you can take it a step further. I can cut a new design here, but before I cut, I might think about what is on the horizon line of my design, where the land meets up with the sky. So maybe on this horizon line, maybe I have some trees that I want to add in. Maybe I have a lot of trees. Maybe I have a big forest. It kind of depends on how much cutting you want to do and how much detail you want to add to your setting. Okay, you can also, if you don't want to make fancy trees like that, you can also just kind of make trees that look like they're kind of clumped together. So if you do some triangles for the top, then you don't have to cut quite as much out. So I'm going to go ahead and cut mine, and then I'm going to do one last row. And when I do the last row, I'm going to pick colors that are closer to sky colors. For example, I might pick colors that are more blues, or some darker colors because it's closer to the land. Now for this one, since this is the last one, before I take my scrap piece of paper away, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hand here to hold it down, and I'm going to peel this back and see if I like it. Now I really can't see a whole lot of my shapes here. If that's okay, then this is a good place to stop. But if you want to be able to see that outline a little bit better, then you can lay it back down because you haven't moved it, and you can add some brighter colors down here. That's really up to you to make your decision about what you like for your artwork. I'm okay with mine, so I'm going to move on. The last step that I'm going to take is, if you have some hairspray, you can spray this down, and then it'll make it so you can't smear the chalk. If you don't have any hairspray, it'll be okay. Just try not to touch it a whole lot, okay? But if you want to ask an adult to get you some hairspray, maybe take it outside and squirt it a couple times. Not so it's wet, just a little bit of hairspray right over the top will make it so you can't smear the chalk away. The last thing that you can think about doing is, if you have a white piece of chalk, this part's kind of tricky, so be careful. But now that you have all that practice, it should be fine. If you take a white piece of chalk and go right over the top of your picture, very, very carefully and very lightly, you can make it so that it looks like there are some stars in the sky. But you probably want to have your ground lined up. So I probably shouldn't have moved mine because you don't want any stars on the ground. So I might even do a test to see how it goes. See, that was kind of a lot. So I wonder if I can scratch this a little and just leave that right here on the chalk and just kind of sprinkle it. That looks kind of pretty. I'm going to sprinkle some stars in the sky. Or maybe I can tap on my chalk. Ooh, tapping works pretty good too. So I'm tapping on it to put some stars up there in the sky. Okay. Again, if you can spray it down with hairspray, that's good. If you can't, it's okay. I'm going to actually take another sheet of paper, and I'm going to lay it right over the top, and I'm going to give it a little rub. That should help press the chalk of the white into my paper. So I'm going to lay it on top, and I'm just going to rub this because I want that white chalk dust to get attached kind of to my paper, and I'm going to peel this away. Okay. So now I have some stars in my sky. I can shake off a little bit. Not very bright stars, but they are some there. Another thing that I could do, if you have a squirt bottle, or even a paintbrush, you can do this next step. A squirt bottle is really kind of fun, but it's pretty messy. So I would recommend just using a paintbrush, but paintbrushes are a little hard to control. If you have a little squirt bottle, I'm missing the bottle part of mine, but if you have a little squirt bottle and you have some white paint, you can put white paint in with the water, and you can do some little squirts right in the sky, and that'll make your stars come out nice and bright. I'm going to show you how you can do this without the squirt bottle, using some white paint just in case you have some. I have a little bit of white paint here, and I'm going to put a little blob on my scrap paper. Ooh, that was kind of a lot. That's okay. I'm going to put a little blob there on my scrap paper. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get my brush wet. Okay, so right now it's dry. I don't need it to be soaking wet, but a little bit wet's good. So I'm going to wipe some off here on the edge. Okay, Okay, I might even squeeze some of the water out on my fingers to make sure it's not super wet. Then I'm going to put a little bit of paint on my brush here, and I'm just going to make sure that it's kind of coating my brush. I don't want a huge glob. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of flick the paint onto my paper, and it's going to put little spots there. Now I'm flicking it downward. A lot of people, when they do splatter painting, they kind of just shake their brush all over. That's going to make a huge mess, and nobody's going to want you to do this anymore. So if you want to be able to splatter paint, you have to kind of flick or tap your brush down so the paint goes down onto your paper. So there I'm getting some stars in my sky. And they're real gentle stars. They're just tiny little spots in my sky. If you get kind of a streaky one, that's okay, because it can kind of look like a comet too. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to remove my picture here. Okay, so now I have a picture of Aurora Borealis, of the northern lights. That could be a really cool setting for some of my characters. This is also a really great way to do a night sky if you would just not add so much color to it. You can just do make the ground here a silhouette, they call that, when it's just a black outline. Make the ground there, and then do some splatter to make some stars in the sky. That can look really beautiful. How else can you use this chalk design here? What else can you come up with that would make a good setting for a good background? So looking back at that picture and looking at our book, The Bear Hunt, I noticed that there's kind of these jaggedy edges that are kind of making concentric circles around each other, like for the going into the cave. And there's kind of these blobs of color. So you could use the same technique, but with maybe even tear paper into a circle. Like if I tear my paper, then I have these rough edges. And that could kind of create the same look that the artist created here. In this picture, they actually painted it with watercolors. But if you wanted to use chalk, then what you can do is you can tear your paper to get a rough edge and make these different shapes and have them fit inside of each other and do one layer at a time, just like we did with this picture. So this is another way that you can use these edges pushing your chalk away to create some interesting artwork. What else can you think of that we could do with something like this?